Hey guys, Conor Orr here from Sports Illustrated, and the MMQB just filed my Week 9 power rankings. Here's a review in under 5 minutes. Get out and vote, but while you're waiting in line, let's talk about which teams are the best in the NFL right now. We have a little bit of a shakeup at the top of the power rankings. Last week I had Detroit 1, Kansas City at number 2. Now I have Detroit 1, Baltimore 2, Kansas City 3. I know a lot of Chiefs fans are going to be upset about this. Let's talk about it. I'm looking at strength of schedule right now, and depending on which analytics service you subscribe to, Baltimore has had a tougher road to this point, and Kansas City, if you look at it on paper, has had some quality wins, but do some of those quality wins contain a little bit of an asterisk, or are we just so tired of this team winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl that we're holding them to a higher standard, just like we did with the Patriots? I'm open to both lines of those questioning, but at this point, midway through the season, I'm starting to get enamored with stuff like style points, right? Are you blowing out some of your tomato can opponents? How do you look against teams that lost by significant double digits to other teams that are inferior, maybe a little bit lower down on the rankings? So why did Baltimore jump up to number 2? Let's talk about that. Over the last 3 weeks, the Ravens are number 1 offensively in EPA. Derrick Henry looks ageless, and Lamar Jackson is more confident as a passer than I've ever seen him at any point in his career, save for college. And we always talked about that at Louisville. I can be that kind of quarterback in the NFL. Well, thankfully, Todd Monken comes to Baltimore, and he turns him into that quarterback. They are so dynamic right now, so powerful, and that offensive line is really coming around. They had a bad game against Cleveland the week before, really recovered against a good Broncos defense this week for a blowout victory. Now, Kansas City is getting Denver this weekend. So we'll see kind of how these two teams match up. Baltimore crushed the Broncos. What will Kansas City do against that same Broncos team? Will Sean Payton be able to recover? Will he be able to get back into the playoffs, be able to get back into the swing of things? Or is this the trap game that finally trips Kansas City up? And how would that make us feel if Kansas City is 8-1 at this point? Where would you put them at the power rankings at that point next week? So another thing we want to look at here is I like some of Baltimore's wins in hindsight, right? Yes, they had that very narrow loss to the Chiefs on opening night. You know, there was a toenail away from beating Kansas City. But after that, a big win over the Commanders, who are just one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. And I think what's impressive to me about that win over the Commanders is Baltimore's secondary is not there, right? They're not all the way back. And Cliff Kingsbury's been roasting some of the better defensive secondaries in the NFL this year and causing a lot of problems. Baltimore was unfazed. They played their game and they were able to beat the Commanders. Not a lot of other teams can say that. And if you look at the Baltimore win over Tampa Bay as opposed to the Kansas City win over Tampa Bay, a little bit more of a dominant performance. And are we just getting to the point where the Ravens had to shake off some of that early season rust, develop that offensive line, and get to the point where we could consider them one of those top teams? And some of that stuff in the rearview mirror, the loss to the Raiders, for example. I mean, look, Kansas City was a Gardner Minshew fumble away from also having a lot of trouble with the Raiders. So again, I look at these two teams as very, very close, but over the last few weeks, Baltimore is playing better than Kansas City offensively, significantly better. Now, defensively, Kansas City has held serve. They're a little bit more consistent in that regard, but you would expect Baltimore to move up here, not only as they get players back, but as they just kind of learn to develop. I mean, Mike McDonald's gone. We have a new coordinator, a new version of the system, a new strain of the system. We think that they will get better as the season goes on. One more thing I'm looking out for. Pittsburgh continues to rise here. The Steelers, I liked them at the beginning of the season. I had them at 10-7 and making the playoffs. I still think that's about where they're going to land. But Commanders and Ravens up next for Pittsburgh. How can they handle this very difficult stretch? And do they remain in the top 10 of the power rankings next week? Stay tuned and we'll talk about it then.